Hello and welcome to this session in which we will discuss the concept of identification and authentication. Identification and authentication are integral parts of a security system. Whether you are trying to protect a digital platform, an application, or a building, a physical access control, a warehouse, a server, identification and authentication, they work together to make sure only authorized individuals who are verified already can have access to certain information or location. But I'm going to start by giving you an analogy about what is identification and authentication before we start to look at the application of it from a security perspective, from a system security perspective. Think about if you got pulled over by a police officer, a traffic stop. They will ask you for your ID, for your driver's license, and your ID will identify who you are. So that's the identification part. Now, when you give this ID to the police officer, what would the police officer do? Let's assume your ID is 954681275. They will take this 1275. They will take those numbers and they will call in to a center to verify if this ID belongs to this person. So they will authenticate. So they will go through another step to make sure what you presented to me is correct. And this is what we mean by identification and authentication. And this is what we will discuss. But we will discuss it from a security system, from a cybersecurity perspective. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com. Farhat Accounting Lectures is a supplemental educational tool that's going to help you with your CPA exam preparation as well as your accounting courses. My CPA material is aligned with your CPA review course such as Becker, Roger, Wiley, Gleam, Miles. My accounting courses are aligned with your accounting courses broken down by chapter and topics. My resources consist of lectures, multiple choice questions, true-false questions, as well as exercises. Go ahead, start your free trial today. Starting with identification. This is the initial step where an individual claims an identity, who they are. It's essentially saying, this is who I am. This can be done in various ways depending on the context. If it's a digital platform, you would usually provide your username or email address. Now for physical access, this could presenting your identification card for a security officer. The aim here is to do what? Is to specify which user is attempting to gain access. Is this user is legitimate? Is this user legitimate? That's fine. That's one. The second step is to authenticate. Following identification, we'll try to authenticate if the process. It's the system way of asking, can you prove that you are who you are? Now, for a police officer, they can call the state system and determine if that driver's license is correct, whether it's suspended or not suspended, expired, so on and so forth. This is often achieved by requiring the user to provide one or more pieces of evidence, factor that can confirm their identity. So authentication method can be categorized into something you know, like a password could authenticate you, or a PIN. Something you have, a smart card, a security token, and we'll talk about those. And something you are, you can authenticate yourself through biometrics or fingerprints or facial recognition, and we'll look at all of those together. The purpose here is to make sure that you are who you are claiming to be. You are not falsely claiming an identity. This adds a layer of security by requiring proof that's hopefully known or possessed only by a genuine user. Now, before identification and authentication takes place, there's a registration. What's registration? Remember, this driver, before they get an ID, they had to register. They had to go through a process to register to get their ID. So before you have your ID, you go through a registration, and this is basically the initial step. So before identification and authentication can occur, there's a prerequisite, and that's the registration. This is where the user first claims an identity within the system and provide the initial proof of identity. For example, if you're getting your driver's license, they might ask for your birth certificate, they might ask for your social security number, they might ask you to provide a bill to show your address. If you're getting your passport, they might ask for your driver's license. So there's an initial registration. So the registration process often involves verifying the user's identity using foundational document or information such as social security number, driver's license, or passport to initially start this process, and this establishes a baseline from which additional or secondary forms of identification can be created and later used for the identification process. The result is this: once the registration is complete, the user has established an identity, the first step within the system, along with means, password, security token that will be based for future authentication. Now, what forms of authentication do we have? We have many forms of authentication. There's an array of authentication technologies available that extend far beyond the traditional username and password. Password is a form of authentication, but it's one method, each offering unique advantages and mechanism for securing access to sensitive data, application, and network. The first one we're going to look at is called context-aware authentication. What is that? This method leverages various contextual data points to authenticate users, especially using mobile devices. Those factors could use time, the time of access. For example, you're supposed to have access from 9 to 5 p.m. Okay? The user's geographical location. You're supposed to be in this building at this time in order to have access. The type of access point is it a mobile app or desktop browser? And the IP address that you are used to make this authentication. Remember, every device will have an IP address. So we can verify you through context-aware authentication. Your location, what time you are logging in, what type of a device you are using, a mobile app, a desktop, and your IP address. This approach adds a layer of security by considering the context in which access is requested, potentially flagging any unusual or suspicious activity. If you're not using the right device, if you're not at the right location, if you're not using the system at the appropriate time. On top of that, they might also ask you for a password. And on top of all of this, we could have digital signature. Digital signature act as an electronic proof of the authenticity. It's similar to a handwritten signature, but with added security feature. Here they utilize cryptographic techniques where a message is encrypted, means it's locked with the sender's private key, and can be decrypted by the receiver using the sender public key. So simply put, the receiver, they will have a code to enter to make sure that they sign properly and the other individual is aware of that code, so it's verified. This not only authenticates the sender's identity, but also ensure the message integrity and non-repudiation, meaning it reliably confirms the sender's identity and that the message have not been altered, because the key is a secret key. So you're supposed to have that code for the key. Single sign-on, or an SSOs, allow users to authenticate once and gain access to multiple resources or devices without needing to log in separately for each one. Now, some people think that's a weakness. It could be a weakness, but also as long as you have strong authentication, single sign-on is a good practice. For example, in large corporations that use different applications, for example, an email client, then they'll have sign-in for the project management software, then another login for internal communication platform, and another email login for a human resource management system. So rather than having 4 different login and 4 different passwords, you would create a system to verify all of those in a single sign-on. So without this SSO, you would need to remember and manage separate login credential for each of these services, which can be cumbersome and less secure because they may not all have the same security feature. Just have one strong security feature for the SSO. It's better than having 5 different login with various security strength. And this is also, you want to make sure you have a strong password, but we'll look at the password shortly. Also, multi-factor authentication is another form. And what's MFA, multi-factor authentication? Enhances security by requiring 2 or more verification factors to authenticate your identity. So you input your login, you input your password, then you would receive a code or a code to your phone, and you would use this code 1234 or whatever the code is to log in. So it's not only the password, you need the password and your phone at the same time. These factors involve a combination of something you know, like a password, and something the user has, like a security token or mobile phone, and something the user is through biometric verification. By combining these factors, we have a multi-factor authentication, which reduces the risk of unauthorized access. PIN is another form of authentication, numeric code that users memorize and use for authentication. PIN alone offer a basic level of security, but for example, when you leave your computer to go back and open your computer, you need the PIN. Then to access an application, you need maybe a multi-factor authentication. So it adds a layer of security. They are most effective when used in conjunction with other form of authentication, like a multi-factor authentication, or a physical token or a biometric data. So PIN by itself is not the best. And you want to change your PIN on a regular basis, and don't use simple sequences like 1111, 1234, and you want to have the PIN more than 4. You want to have one of 5 or 6, so it's easier to crack. Token. What's a token? Token is something that looks like this, a piece of hardware that you have that has numbers, and those numbers will change every 30 seconds. So you input your password, and you'll have 30 seconds to input this code. There are devices that generate passcodes used for authentication. And now talking, you could have a token on your phone as well. For example, you have Google Authentication. They can be either the synchronous those token, generate a time-based code that must match the server's code at the same time. For example, this one, notice here, there's a time running. You cannot see it, but I do use one like this for my banking, where if I need to log into my banking system, I have to input this number, but this number changes every 30 seconds. Or asynchronous would generate codes based on shared algorithm without relying on synchronized time. It doesn't have time, just it's based on some other algorithm. Nevertheless, you need the password in this piece of a physical device with the token number. Smart cards is another form of authentications. Are plastic cards embedded with a microprocessor that can process data or act as a secure certificate for various transaction or access control. So you need the smart card in order to process a transaction or access a certain area. And these cards can store identification data, cryptographic keys, and more, making them a versatile tool for both physical and digital security application. But we gotta make sure you don't use those smart cards. Biometrics are very secure form of authentication. Use unique physical characteristic of the user, like what? Like your fingerprints. That's as unique as it gets. Facial recognition, voice pattern through your voice, iris scan through your eye to verify your identity. This method is highly secure due to the difficulty of replicating biometric features, and it's commonly used in high security environment because it's very secure, and for devices like smartphone where the ease of use is also a priority. Obviously, password is another form of authentication, but we need to have an effective password for digital security because password being both the primary method of authentication and a common target for cyber attackers. So we have to make sure we are using a strong password. The strength and security of password hinge on various factors, including their complexity and how they are managed by users and organizations. Let's first look at some common weakness in password usage. Weak password will be what? Many users opt for passwords that are simple and easy to guess, like password or 123456, that are vulnerable and quickly compromised. Reused password across accounts. You're using the same password across many accounts. So if one account is compromised, you're compromising all the other accounts, increasing the risk of a breach. Password sharing. You don't want to share your password with others. This will compromise security, especially if shared through unsecured method. Static password. Failing to update the password can make them more susceptible to being compromised over time. And password recording, where you write down the password or storing them in an unsecure location, writing them on your desk, right? So those are common weak password in use. How to strengthen the password? So what method do we need to utilize? To address password weaknesses, we implement password complexity standard. We just say certain passwords are unaccepted. Complexity increases security by expanding the range of possible character combination by making the password harder to crack. Length and complexity of the password. Longer passwords are inherently more secure. Why? Because it's going to take more time for a hacker to crack them. Also, a password with 4 characters has fewer combinations than one with 8. You want to have a longer password. This will include both upper and lower, which makes it harder. Numbers and special character further increase this complexity. A 4-character password using upper and lowercase letter plus numbers has 14,776,336 possible combination. Increasing the length to 8 jumps to this number. You can look at it, you can read it, illustrating the significant boost in security from adding character. In addition to the password, you may want to do what? Authenticate the device itself. So it's not only you're authenticating the user, authenticate the device. Device authentication is a security process that focuses on confirming the legitimacy of the device attempting to connect. So it's not only the users, you're making sure the cell phone, the tablet, the laptop, the desktop that you're using are legitimate ones, rather than directly authenticating the user's personal credentials, or you could do both. This method relies on identifying unique attributes of a device, such as an IP address or MAC, which is the Media Access Control Address. Those are unique to that device. So key points on device authentication: instead of validating the user's identity, or in addition to that, device authentication checks for specific unique identifiers associated with the hardware attempting to make the connection. Actually use both user's identity and device authentication. And these identifiers ensure that only authorized devices can access a network. Also, you want to do a role in multi-factor authentication. While device authentication on its own may not provide robust security, as I mentioned, add an MFA to it. Multi-factor authentication, the role of the multi-factor authentication, it's even augmented, significantly increase your security protection. In such a setup, a user would need to provide their login credentials, something they know, and be using a recognized device. So I'm gonna identify you, authenticate you. It's not only that, I'm gonna authenticate the machine that you are using. So I am adding multiple security layers to my network. Now NIST, the National Institute of Standards for Technology, they make few recommendations about password. They would say the password should have a minimum of 8. Most companies now use 12 for more enhanced security. And change your password on a regular basis. This practice ensures that even if a password is compromised, it's compromised for a shorter period of time. Let's take a look at this multiple choice questions from farhatlectures.com. In digital signature technology, what is the main purpose of the sender encrypting the message with their private key? So what's the main purpose for encrypting the message in a digital signature? Is it A, to ensure the message can be decrypted by anyone? No, we don't want the message to be decrypted. It means read by anyone. I would say A is a no-brainer. We can't take it out. B, to verify the sender's identity and ensure message integrity. Is this the purpose for encrypting the message in a digital signature? And I would say yes. Encrypting with a private key allows the recipient to use the sender's public key to verify the sender's identity. And this way we know that the message has not been altered to, which is we have the message integrity. We're maintaining the message integrity. So when you sign, you're signing a contract, you're signing some sort of a deal, and it is the same, the original one. Say B is a good answer choice, but let's look at C. To encrypt the message content for confidentiality. Yes, encryption will give you confidentiality, but that's not the main purpose for the digital signature. It's message integrity and to ensure the identity of the sender. So C is kind of partially right, but B is definitely a better answer choice. To increase the complexity of the cryptographic algorithm, well, the complexity of the cryptographic algorithm is not directly related to the use of the private key for encryption. The two are not related. It could be a byproduct, but that's not the main purpose. So the main purpose is to verify the sender's identity. The senders is whoever sent us this message. We can verify that that's who they are, and the message has not been altered with, that there's a message integrity. So the answer is B as in boy. What should you do now? You want to go to Farhat Lectures, look at additional MCQs. That's going to help you whether you are studying for your CPA exam, accounting courses, finance courses, or other professional certification. Invest in yourself. Good luck, study hard, and of course, stay safe.